Welcome to the iNetrepreneur Radio Show. We are so honored to bring you your host, the ultimate celebritypreneur, connecting businesses and celebrities worldwide. Winner of the Networking Organization of the Year, best-selling author, magazine publisher, trainer, and owner and founder of Network Together and the iNetrepreneur Media Network from magazines, TV, and radio network. We're excited to bring you your host, Mr. Robert W. Jones.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for being here this Halloween. No, where am I thinking Halloween? This Valentine's week. Thank you for being here. We had that on Monday, so I hope all the Valentines and Palentines, had a wonderful Monday to start this week off. My name is Robert Jones. I'm the iNetrepreneur Network founder, chairperson, and owner. And I just happened upon it. For many of you, I call myself a recovering programmer. I used to work for GoDaddy, Realtor.com, Linsco Private Ledger. I worked in the marketing and technology services area, and somehow I escaped that world to come to this crazy world of personal and professional development. We meet here each and every week from 2:30 to 3:30 Mountain Standard Time, and we're in that great state of Arizona, so sometimes it's Pacific Standard Time, but right now it's MST. I want to remind everyone, we just brought out our book, Art of Connection, 365 Days of Inspirational Quotes. And that book is right here. My co-author is Orlia Moore. She teaches speakers how to profit from being on stage and also understand the business side of public speaking. She is my co-author on this book. You can find out more information by going to mybook.to/Art of Connection 2/Art of Connection 2. Our first book is at mybook.to/just Art of Connection. I also want everyone to know that our third book will be coming out of November this year. It's going to be 365 Days of Transformational Quotes. You can be a contributing author in this book. And believe me, I am not becoming Bill Gates. I'm just really covering costs for entrepreneurs, business owners, and other influencers who want to be a part of a movement that serves their community, their business community. And that's with support, hope, and inspiration. Again, you can go to 365 Days of Transformationalquotes.com to find out more information about that. Our early bird special is $147 for a random page or $197 for a reserved page. Lastly, please go to ntevents.net. That is our short link that provides all the information to our events, our networking chapters, our radio shows, our business and professional development academies. You can go on there. We put on over 1,000 meetings and events per year. So if you can't find business in network, maybe you're in the wrong business. I always like to say it because there's quite a few people for you to network and connect with. I am really excited today. I have a very special guest, and I always love getting to meet, people like our guest today. And our guest today is Miss Jackie Simmons, and she is with the Success Journey Academy. And why I like this so much is because, I tell people, and I tease my wife, I say, for some people, I have to create a whole radio show just to be able to touch base with them. And I feel that way about Jackie. To me, she is a self-made woman. I've been able to study up and read a little bit of about her background. I believe she has a heart for people in a way that a lot of people are just finding out now. I think she trailblazed it 40 years before, and I don't mean to date you now on this, Jackie, but I think 40 years probably before most of us really started thinking about what does, mindset look like, what does heart set look like, and really what does, communication between even the sexes, looks like. And I really appreciate that. And she also has the thing that I love most, being a foster parent, adopting a child myself, my third child, and that she has a heart for kids. And in our organization, our fifth pillar is service to our youth. And so I'm very honored and excited to have Jackie Simmons on our show today. Welcome, Jackie. How are you?
I am well, Robert. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I am, like I said, I'm totally excited about you. You give me goosebumps because, really it's one thing, Jackie, And I'm just going to say it this way. My dad says, the best way to know if a person really wants to be involved is they put their money where their mouth is, and I'm really saying that in the business, aspect. I mean, not only did you bring yourself into the art of connection in this community and this movement to help level up entrepreneurs who weren't as fortunate through the retooling that's had to take place because of COVID these last 2 years. I mean, you also brought other budgeting, want to be authors to the forefront. And, I want to say thank you for that, because not everyone else will actually, really spend money. I mean, that's what you did, in time with other people to bring them up with you. And you did that. And, I appreciate you so much, one, for doing that, and two, believing in the concept on what we're trying to provide for other entrepreneurs.
There's so much that you just said in that. I'm like, my head is spinning and I'm going to have to unpack it. We've got 2 rules and in my organization. So in my organization, it's called my Ballpark. And I teach people something called Ballpark Theory, where, hey, you're either the club owner or the ball player. No matter where you are at any given moment, you are in one of those 2 roles. So my job as a club owner, communicate my rules clearly, is one of the 3 responsibilities. The first one is, of course, put my rules in writing, actually know what they are and communicate them clearly. And then the third one is to apply them equitably, not equally. And I say this especially for parents, because you wouldn't have the same expectations of a 12-year-old that you have of a 2-year-old. I hope.
I hope,
Yeah.
and I love that, because one of the things that I teach my kids as well, I say it's not the equality of the paycheck, it's the equality to have opportunity, which determines your paycheck. And I say that's where we need to really level that playing field, and so I have 2 daughters and I have 2 sons. And one of the things I always tell them is I live by one principle when it comes to boys and girls. And it's one that my mom taught me. She said, son, I want you to understand this in life. It's not a man thing. It's not a woman thing. It's a person thing. And the sooner that we all understand that, the sooner that we can move forward with true velocity. And that's something that I learned from my mom, and her PhD was in curriculum and instruction. And believe me, growing up with a mom like that, I was always being corrected, Jackie. Always being corrected.
And what's bizarre is, in this world that we're in now, where people are starting to study emotional intelligence, we understand that method of education, always correcting, they call it corrective complex. We've created a sign for it in my company. Because the knee-jerk reaction is to correct someone, to, quote, help them by giving them the right information. And there's a way to do it where it is received. And then there's the way that I grew up with. My mama was a teacher. My daddy was a drill sergeant, and his daddy was a preacher. I had somebody telling me what to think, what to do, and what to believe, from the moment I was born.
And it's so funny. And my dad was an engineer, and he was a mathematician at that. My mom was she was an academic. The story of her life was always professional development and academic development, whether it be in the corporate or it be in the university field. My grandmother, she was a Hispanic woman who immigrated from Mexico and started the first labor union in the United States that was started by a woman, Nelly Correa. And the company was called Boise Cascade. And so we have a long history of people who led, but I also did, Jackie, have that as well. I had that corrective action again and again, and probably why at 17 years old, I joined the Marines, just to get more corrective action for another 6 years. So it was tough. So let's dive into your childhood a little bit more. Tell us some of the formative things that you did learn from, your family, and maybe some of the things on how, they really apply to you today.
All right. I'm going to give you a short story on a reality check. I am one of 4 daughters. I'm the youngest. So I not only had the parents and the grandparents, I had 3 older sisters. And for anybody who follows astrology, All three of my sisters are Virgo. I'm a Gemini. Anyone who follows human design, all three of my sisters fall into the mainstream categories, generators, manifesting generators, and projectors. I'm a pure manifester. And when they read my chart, they said, Jackie, your parents would have had no clue how to parent you. and it was true. It was true. So my formative years are best described in contrast. My guy, Mark, was born and raised in the Bronx. He went to school from kindergarten through high school, testing into the Bronx High School of Science. Same people. I went to kindergarten on 2 continents. I'm an Army brat. So my formative years were spent in constant movement. Born in Kentucky, lived there 6 months, went to California. A couple of places in California, then to Okinawa. Coming back from Okinawa, Dad didn't come with us. We were told it's because he'd been sent to Vietnam. And while he did go to Vietnam, 2 years later, when he was back home, is when we found out that it wasn't the war in Vietnam between the North and the South that caused us to leave Okinawa without him. It was the private war that was being fought between my parents.
In the private war is really the war that hits home the hardest, isn't it?
It is. There's no way to explain to a child after the divorce has happened in a way that's going to make sense. Because I was 8 years old. I came in from school. I walked into the house. I started to drop my backpack, saw Mom in the living room, put it back on my shoulder because it didn't belong in the front hallway. Realized she had company, said, "Hi, Mom, sorry, I didn't know you had company." Went to my room. And then walked out of my room and back into the living room because the man in the living room with my mom was my dad. And I didn't recognize him. 2 years in the jungles of Vietnam changed people. And so I had not recognized him. That summer we did a summer trip. We went camping. That's what we used to do with Dad before he went to Vietnam, before all of that chaos started. But Mom didn't come. It was a really bizarre kind of summer. And when they finally told us that Daddy was never going to live with us again, I knew it was my fault. Because children are naturally narcissistic. And if parents don't take that into consideration when they explain things, children start to form what we now know as limiting beliefs. I was responsible for the world as a kid. As the youngest, I was the stabilizing factor. And I didn't know how valuable that skill set would be later on. But at the time, everybody else was a little crazy, and I seemed to be the only one who was sane. And that's just the perspective of an 8-year-old. It's not what was true if you were the observer. It was just my perspective. But it's taken a long time for me to figure out that there's a difference between perspective and truth.
Yes. And there's some other things I believe that you develop as well and you train nowadays, and that's also resilience, and also a certain amount of tolerance. And I think as an entrepreneur and as a human being, you have to have both of those aspects, don't you, Jackie?
I'm going to say yes and no. And the reason is because I do not put resilience and tolerance in the same boat at all. Now, if you had said resilience and acceptance, I would have been absolutely 100%. But I help people stop tolerating. I think tolerations are one of the challenges with having a healthy sense of self, what some people call healthy boundaries. I call it a soul that doesn't have holes in it. And when I'm teaching about a human hole puncher, how you get holes in your soul, I speak from experience. Growing up in a chaotic environment, by the time I was an adult, I could not put enough love and joy in the top of myself because it just all leaked out. And other people's crappy attitudes could seep in. And once I understood how that happened to me, and how to unwind that for people, That's when I realized that I had a calling. And I did my best, as many people do, to run from it as fast as I could.
And and I love that you say that, because one of the things I wanted to say is I was those tolerant types.
Hmm.
I was the kid that always felt like I had to be in the middle and the peacemaker between my parents. That's how my childhood was. And the problem with tolerance, and see, and that's why I'm glad you brought it up, and I think for illustration purposes this works for us. The thing about tolerance is it diminishes the value I have for me. And for the longest time, the tolerance that I had was, you could say I was putting up with. And for the longest time, people who are overly tolerant have the inability to stop and or say no. And that's what I really love about you, because you take the acceptance of, every person has gifts, every person has limitations, and it's just, what are we going to accept and how are we going to know ourselves best? And that's what I think that you help entrepreneurs and really people in general get past these things to create the best versions of yourself. And I almost don't like even saying that anymore, because I hear this best version of yourself so much anymore. I'm not even sure the people that say it know what that means. And so we might talk about that a little bit, but with your early childhood, what are some like just professional, experiences, like maybe some first jobs and some early education where I mean, because I love the lens that you're looking out of, because I think that there was a certain mindfulness that you had innate in you to kind of view the world in such a way and start analyzing all the things that revolve around you. Tell me a little bit about those moments.
Survival skills abound when you are raised in a chaotic environment. And most environments are chaotic, guys. Trauma and drama are not reserved for massive things like me moving across the world when I was in kindergarten. Trauma and drama occur when we learn to tolerate, Robert. We learn to sit still by the age of 4. Sitting still is not the natural state of a 4-year-old. We were all traumatized and introduced to drama at a really young age. What I knew about myself by the time I was in high school was that my mama's job kind of world, she was an educator. By then, she was the director of special education, a supervisor of special ed. I knew that her life being boxed in, being held to this location, all of these things was not for me. In high school, I was in the Junior Achievement Club. Think of it as the 4-H of business. It's 4-H for entrepreneurs. It's where we learned leadership. It's where we learned how companies work. We sold stock, we made products, we sold the products. And at the end of the school year, we divvied up the money. Exactly the way business is really done. By the way, great organization. It's also where I got my first speaker training, because Dale Carnegie decided to donate and teach a group of us that were in junior achievement the principles of Dale Carnegie's version of speaking. His book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I just bought another copy because I keep giving mine away.
And I time to mind, I bring up Dale Carnegie's name because for as influential as he's been in so many people's lives, I still think that his influence is still underserved by the people who speak professional and personal development. I really do. I think he's far more of a factor in the industry than the industry gives him credit for.
He said one thing in his book that influences everything that makes my business work. And what's hysterical is I was reading the book $100 Million Offers by Alex Hermosi.
Hmm.
And Alex has this great graphic, and part of the graphic is straight out of Dale Carnegie's. I mean, he took this one piece. I'm like, that's exactly what Dale Carnegie meant. What Dale Carnegie said was make the problem seem easy to solve.
Absolutely.
What Alex adapted that to was, you want people to believe that they will not have to put a lot of effort Because the two things that make people say no to an offer is if it seems like it's going to be a lot of work, and if it seems like it's going to take a lot of time before they see results. Understanding that helps me understand why I tell my coaches they'll never have to sell. They'll never have to market, because we not only make the problem easy to solve, we get it done in the first session and every session. And so when you can guarantee something that's easy, almost effortless, because the training is done in a state of deep relaxation, so pretty much effortless for my clients, and fast and effective. Those two things will change your business when you can explain what you do in those terms. So thank you, Dale Carnegie, for helping me understand to make the problem seem easy to solve.
Absolutely. Along with Dale Carnegie, in my life, I always look to different people who've just set different benchmarks, different awareness. And I love that word as much as any word I can think of. What are a couple of mentors maybe that you had in your life that had a profound effect that, also helped shape you to become who you are?
There are two kinds of mentors in my life, and sometimes they inhabit the same body. There's the person who helps me move forward faster, either by transferring skills or transferring attitudes. And there's the person who motivates me because they piss me off. And that is one of the fastest motivators for me. And I was told by one of my mentors that I could not do something, that only what I couldn't do was make a living using the methodology that they had just certified me in. They told me after I graduated that only the instructors were making a living. The practitioners were not. I was stunned, dismayed. I had just invested 5 years in multiple 5 figures, learning the skills so that I could close my daycare, because I was ready to go out and play with the grown-ups. My kids had outgrown my daycare, so had I. I wanted to go play with the grown-ups. And here I had studied for 5 years to be able to make this transition gracefully, and I was just told it wasn't economically viable. That conversation is what's driving my business today. Because fast forward many, many years, and I have a mentor who created a program to solve the problem of high-end coaching programs that do not deliver high-end tangible return on investment. And a year ago, she told me what she was doing. Needless to say, I was in. If she could solve that problem, I wanted to know more. I just wanted to follow her and figure out how her brain worked. And now I have a program that does that. All of my coaches make money within their first month with me. They have to be willing to be wealthy. If they're not willing to be wealthy, they're not a good fit for conscious transformational programs. And we bust limiting beliefs all the time because they are so rampant in the industry. There are so many coaches that are not making over $30,000 a year. As a matter of fact, the average is less than that. Healers are in the same boat. Even acupuncturists, the average is around $35,000 a year. That is not what I call a living wage in this day and age. And yet they can save lives. They can change lives. They have certainly changed mine. So I have two kinds of mentors. All of the people who have helped me along my journey have helped me along my journey, whether they were helping me with speaking, helping me with business skills. They all gave me something, even if what they gave me was contrast.
Yeah, and I have your information scrolling across the screen, Jackie. Everything you're saying is resonating so much with me, and I think a lot of families have certainly been very chaotic, even in the last 2 years. I mean, in addition to how life has been for the last 100 years, and I think that we are changing. We're seeing the Great Resignation come to fruition over the last 24 months to to 30 months, and I think that people want to express themselves in different ways, but I think what you provide and you help, and Jackie, your information is going across, is you help these entrepreneurs who are coming out of this workforce, and I say they're looking for the 4 F's: fun, flexibility, finances and freedom. And the thing is, but if they don't know how to be a prophet of their profit, they will never get there.
Oh,
So
well, you're not going to get away with the jargon with me. We'll come back to this profit thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to take a little break right now, and I'm going to bring Jackie back for our next segment. Thank you, Jackie.
Network together. It's all about connections. Expand your sphere of influence. Build relationships. Be part of something bigger. Be part of Network Together.
All right, I am here with Jackie Simmons. She is with the Success Journey Academy. I am really excited that she's on her show today. We're also going to talk about another concept that she has concerning kids in our third segment, which I'm also excited about. But Jackie was stopping me in my tracks, and she said, what about that jargon? Be a prophet of your profit. What does that look like? And it's something that I kind of invented, and I say to some of my entrepreneurs as well, because sometimes they don't manifest what direction they want to go in, and they don't plan on how to get their direction leverage to get there. And so many times that they stop short of their profits. But again, I'm here with Jackie, and I'm very excited with you today. And so let's talk about these entrepreneurs that have limiting beliefs, because what you call them is in my reading was the elephant, or these internal or these inner saboteurs, so to speak, that keep us from actually leveling to, there's that dreaded word, our best self. So
No.
inner saboteurs a little bit, Jackie.
Oh, geez. Okay. So we are going to have so much fun with this. I'm going to assume that when you say be a prophet to your profit, you're talking about profit, Prophet.
Like the biblical sense. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So as a speaker, unpack it for people every time you say it, Robert, because it's so easy to make it, to hear it as profit of your profit, all both spelled the same way. And so my brain first went there, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. And then when we took the break, my brain went, oh, I'll bet it meant. And I'm like, aha, okay, now I get it. So you want to speak into your truth. You want to speak into what you want to have happen, and visualizing that. And what gets in the way, and this is why I do the limiting belief busting. Okay, we do this every week. It's a free masterclass on Wednesdays where I teach people how to walk an elephant, how to change a limiting belief into empowerment. And it's super simple. I love doing it because when someone decides that they want something in their business, they want, well, I'll use myself. I want 100 coaches in the Conscious Transformational Coaching Program this year. So we start the process with, what do you want? And then what are the thoughts in your head that are preventing you from taking action on it? This is how you start to discover what your inner saboteur's language is, what's really going on in your head. And I tell everybody to take what they want, whether it was a dollar amount or a number of people, and put a 0 at the end of it. And then you can really start to hear what's in the way, what's coming up. And it falls into very specific categories every time I teach it. And so it's a simple 4-step process. And we have to be able to do this. We have to be able to walk our elephants, to turn what we believe is possible, because our lives are not run by what we think. Our lives are run by what we believe. And most of us have beliefs that were created by decisions we made at a time we don't even remember. Mm-hmm. Like my decision that I was responsible for the actions of my parents. And Robert, here's how it happens to people. You're walking in a grocery store and you hear it an aisle or two over. Some adult gets into a scuffle with a kid, verbal scuffle. And all of a sudden you hear the adult say, "You make me so mad." In that instant, the adult hands an emotional remote control to the child. The child doesn't know any better. They accept it. And the minute they do, they become responsible for the emotional state and stability of the adult. What about that makes sense? But it's how I was raised. And it's how most of us are raised, and our culture endorses it. You make me feel like a natural woman. Oh, no, he didn't. You just wanted something and you gave him credit so that you could have what you wanted. The reality is, people don't make us feel. People can give us things that trigger us for sure, but they don't make us feel because they're not responsible for our triggers. And it was understanding triggers and what was causing, how they can work for us and work against us, that led me to create the 3-hour workshop that I do called the 4 Flavors of Emotional Energy. It's actually emotional resilience mastery. And that's the level 1 of our programs. We get it done in 3 hours because you have to be able to untrigger yourself. We've been handed so many emotional remote controls, and we give them away. We make other people responsible for our emotions. It is a chronic problem that we don't even know how we feel anymore unless somebody's around to push our buttons. I'm not happy with that.
And let's talk about those triggers, and let's talk about those delimiting beliefs, because, those words as well are thrown around a lot. And, and I appreciate you saying, be a prophet of your prophet. and I used to run poetry slams, so I have to be very careful how animated I get. People used to go to me, they say, are you a motivational speaker? And I say, oh, heck no, I'm a theatrical speaker. That's what I am, so, because I know who I am, but
it helps.
But here's the thing. I mean, triggers, sometimes it's almost like, what's a trigger? It doesn't sound that impressive if you just hear the word trigger. But the thing is, triggers actually start programs in a person's psyche or self, don't they?
It's worse than that, Robert.
Yeah.
Triggers change your biochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where we get this tendency from. Our common ancestor, his name is Og. He's a caveman. Og has breakfast, gets up, walks out of his cave, sees a shaking bush, boom, he's back at his cave. He didn't have to think about it. If we could freeze frame what would happen, what you would see happening is that Og's body biochemically changed. His blood became flooded with epinephrine, adrenaline, and cortisol, what we call the stress cocktail. That meant that the blood flowed to his arms and legs, and he was ready for fight or flight. That's the problem with triggers. It's not what they do to the head, we'll get to it in a second, but what they do to your body. We live in a day and an age where we're triggered all the time, and we don't do what Og did, because Og jumped back into the cave. And then once he was in the cave, what did he do? Took some deep breaths and shook it off. Mm-hmm. We don't have, and of course, by the way, here's the reason he reacted that way. Last week, Og's friend Larry got close to a shaking bush and got eaten by a tiger that was in the bush. Og didn't have any memory capacity except for what's wrong with this picture. It's why that's such a powerful game, and we all love to play the what's wrong with this picture, because it taps into our brain's natural negative bias. And we all have it. We have the same brain, the same actual wiring that Og did. We just don't respond the same way because we don't have very many real tigers. But I had a boss. He liked to stand over my shoulder. And when he did, I couldn't think straight. And he would ask me a question. I'd mutter something about getting back to him. He'd leave. What was I doing while he was there? If I was breathing, it was all up here. Oh, by the way, breathing from up here tells your body that you're in danger. So it pumps out more adrenaline, more epinephrine, more chemicals, more cortisol. He'd leave, and then I would take a deep breath. And then a miracle would occur. Because the blood that flows to your arms and legs when you're triggered, it comes from your head. It comes from the higher functioning areas of your brain. So I was dealing with an oxygen deprived brain when my boss was over my shoulder. Didn't matter which one. The funniest thing would happen. I'd take a couple of deep breaths and I would know what he wanted. And I'd have to jump up and chase him down the hall to give him the information that he wanted. I didn't know how the brain worked back then. Now I get it. Mm-hmm. And this is the challenge with being triggered. Most people don't know how to positively trigger themselves. I love Marshall Goldsmith's work. He's a LinkedIn influencer. He wrote a book titled Triggers. He talks in terms of how do you create positive triggers. What I realized is that people can't use positive triggers if they are dealing with the stress cocktail in their bloodstream. And so we created a way to get untriggered first using muscle memory, time-honored techniques that come out of neurolinguistic programming, pattern interrupts. And we created first, how do you soothe yourself? And then you can trigger yourself into a positive, powerful state of emotion. You can get conscious control of your triggers. And that's like the first level of emotional resilience, is to have conscious control of your triggers so that you're not living in fight or flight. Because, Robert, have you heard about this new medical dilemma called adrenal fatigue?
Absolutely.
It's relatively recent that people started talking about blowing out their adrenals. Here's what's happening. You get triggered. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Somebody disses you. And your body gets full of the blood, the chemicals, the stress cocktail. And because we're not fighting, we're not using our big muscles, we're not pausing and taking 3 deep, slow breaths, we're not doing what Og did and jumping and breathing deeply, which when you take deep breaths, you trigger sensors at the base of your lungs that actually produce the counterbalancing chemicals to the stress cocktail, which is why Og went back to homeostasis. He went back to neutral immediately. But that's not what happens today. That level of cortisol in your bloodstream, especially cortisol, it's addictive as all get out. It takes 24 hours to naturally degrade. When was the last time you went 24 hours without getting triggered? Guys, all you gotta do is watch the news. It's designed to trigger you. So now you've got this much in your bloodstream, you get triggered again, you're up to here. You get triggered again, you're up to here. And you wonder why you're not happy. It's because instead of having dopamine in your system, the things that make you feel good, your blood is full of cortisol, epinephrine, and adrenaline. There are cures for that.
And what I have seen over the last 40 to 45 years is this cocktail is also created through corporate marketing machines. And it's driving to a younger and younger and younger audience, and it's hooking them at an earlier and earlier and earlier age. And what we are creating is a certain dependency that is never going to be cured, but only treated. And that in my world's what I've seen.
I spotted an elephant. The elephant is the limiting belief. And the limiting belief, Robert, is that it will never be cured. And the reason that's a limiting belief is because when you put that word never into the sentence, you've turned off the most powerful search engine in the world, the one that exists behind your eyes and between your ears. When your subconscious hears you say it will never be cured, your subconscious stops looking for possibilities that could cure it.
Well, and what I'm saying is, from the corporate level, when I was a computer programmer, I was trained without knowing it that was the training that I received, was to, actually, pardon?
They wanted you to be stressed because they thought it meant you would focus.
But they wanted me to create stress, and they wanted me to create addiction, because you don't want cures, because cures aren't profitable. And
Right.
so if a person feels like they can never change, and that's what I mean, they never will. And
Exactly.
I say this because when I worked for a pharmaceutical and nutraceutical company, the CEO stood up. There was that one little tech guy, that was me, and there was one woman in that big boardroom. You always kind of have it that way, at least when I was involved in the late 90s. And he stood up and pounded that table and he said, "We need more sick people." And that
Hmm.
was the day I decided to leave, because I knew it wasn't about really curing, it was about sustaining. And so when I say never, that's what a lot of what I see in corporations are doing out there, is they're channeling, these what you call the inner saboteurs, these
Oh, they use
elephants, and they feed off of it because it's profitable.
they absolutely need for us to be triggerable. By the way,
Right.
when I started to study neurolinguistic programming, I only studied it enough so that I could recognize when it was being used against me. Trust me, the marketing engine on Wall Street and internet marketing now, they know how to trigger us. They know what words we use. They study us like we are under a microscope. And I was trained in some of that. And I was like, this just feels wrong.
Mhm.
And the reason it felt wrong is because it was not done in service.
No.
And when the service to your client is in conflict with the service to the company, that's a culture that is ripe for revolution. And unfortunately, that's happening more and more.
I
And
agree.
that's
You
why
know,
there are so many entrepreneurs, because we want to make our own rules. We want to own our own ballparks. We want to be the one who says, these are my values, which is why my company has a prime directive. Our prime directive: no one gets re-traumatized on our watch.
you know,
Period.
and that's one of the things that resonates with me, because for me, when I left that industry, it was like I felt like every entrepreneur needs a place to go so they
Mm.
can grow, a safe sandbox to play, because there is any number of willing sharks out there to part people with their money in a heartbeat. But once that money is parted, where are they after that? Because there is no aftercare program. and,
There's,
and that's one of the
there's a
things I've
lot.
seen far too often.
You've got a lot of truth in that one. And that's why I'm kind of getting the pause button in here, because what we've seen in the industry, and that's why I think that the entire coaching and consulting industry, healing industry, is ripe for revolution, that I intend to be one of the leaders of, because I'm ready to revolt, is this idea of people investing in high-end programs and not getting tangible,
Mhm.
concrete, high-end ROIs, and being told it's their fault.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more of that. I've been a part of those programs. I've seen those programs, and I'm trying to keep people from becoming a part of those programs. So you and I are very aligned in that value set. You know what? I'm going to put your information going across the screen. We have time for one more segment. Jackie, I am enjoying my conversation with you so much. We need like a 3-part show series so we can get this all in together. I'm gonna play a little short commercial break, and then I'm going to ask you a few more questions about your special heart for women and raising up women. And let's talk a little bit about our youth in our next segment. So I look forward to having you back for our last segment. Thank you so much again for being on the show.
Network together. It's all about connections. Expand your sphere of influence. Build relationships. Be part of something bigger. Be part of Network Together.
Jackie, again, thank you so much for being on my show. You know, it you've created, you've tapped into some emotion in me, as a host of this show, because one thing I know and I can feel is you resonate with a heart for people. You have an appetite for them. And one of the things I've always I've always stated is, you can have an IQ and you can even have an EQ, but you have something more, and I call it the CQ, and that's the connectors quotient, because that's the energy and that's the belief that causes the action, because emotion without action or intelligence without action is meaningless to me. But to have your spirit of energy and belief, the connectors quotient, to go out there and find and raise up people to study this, and to be tireless at it, to me, the CQ of your life is beyond belief, and the IQ and the EQ are just along for the ride. And that's what I want to serve up to you. And that's why I appreciate you so much so far. And I saw it because when we were putting together the book, I'm like, who is this Jackie Simmons? Who is this Jackie Simmons? I kept, Jackie Simmons just kept coming up, and there was all this positive, and you lead through your demonstration, and I think that that's what's really amazing, about you. But, there's two special places in your heart that I also see, and that's your heart for women, and that's your heart for kids, and my first question is, in your life, did you just see that there is this hole, this void, this need, this special place to really, challenge and level up, women? Tell me a little bit about, through your lens on how did that come about?
Oh my goodness. Okay, you make me
There is some space there for that. There is.
So great. All right. It was 1984. My husband and I decided to divorce. My daughters, 5, 3, and 1. And I went back out to work. Now, I'd gotten married young. Me and my high school diploma went out and found a job in sales, something that for me, it's just conversations. And I didn't know that I really sucked at sales at the time, but I got to the end of the month and I could pay daycare or I could pay rent, and I couldn't pay both. I got really, really lucky. One of my friends said, "Hey, Jackie, why don't you start a home-based business? Why don't you do what I do?" I was lucky. She was a registered family daycare provider. And I'm like, tell me more. So I fast-tracked through their training, got certified, because whatever they called it, certified license, I think it was licensed in that state. And I was now home with my kids. And I had openings. It's only allowed 6 kids in my care other than my own. So I had openings and I needed to fill them. And I didn't know anything about business. I knew nothing about networking. I knew nothing about anything. And when I walked my oldest daughter to the bus stop in the morning, pushing the stroller and hanging on to the other toddler, I just told everybody, "Hey, I got my license as a family daycare provider. I have openings. If you know anybody who's looking for before and after school care, infant care, whatever, I've got it all. Bring it on." That's called referral marketing. But I didn't know that's what it was. I went to my first ever in my whole life professional organizational meeting of the Association of Family Daycare Providers. I intended to be my normal, because at the time I was a very insecure single mama. I was ready to, I'm just going to watch, just going to listen, just grateful to be there, grateful to be part of something, because it had been a lonely ride for me. And I heard 2 providers talking, and they're going, "Yeah, I'm getting these phone calls and I don't have any openings." And, and I'm like going, wait a minute. You all don't have a referral system so that if you're getting phone calls and somebody else has openings, because I've got openings, I want those phone calls. And they're like, "Well, we've been talking about setting up a referral system." And I'm like, "Really, really cool." They says, "Yeah, we've been working on it for 3 years." I blurted. There's danger when you blurt. And what happened is I got voluntold that I could head it up. So I predate computers, guys. This was done on index cards. I just started, I got the list of who was in the association. I made a card for everybody. I got on the phone with them. I'm like, okay, this is how you let me know when you have, what I discovered? The person running the referral system got all the phone calls. My openings filled. Now, I don't know what you call that in this day and age, but we're just going to call it blind luck. And I was able to support my kids even when there was no child support, because that happened.
Yeah.
The power of this. I am an unintentional, accidental entrepreneur. And I got lucky. As I started venturing out, by the way, when I got to the point where I knew the names of all 7 dwarfs and I had no idea who was in office, it was time for me to go out and play with the grown-ups.
Yes.
And I studied the Eastern Healing Arts. I started networking. I realized that while the Eastern Healing Arts had cured me of my back pain, for most people, they needed stress management. And that's when I coined the term stress management consultant and put all of my skills under that basket and went out to, quote, network with the grown-ups. I have a collection of business cards over the years because I would learn a little bit and have to change a little bit. And I would learn a little bit and have to change a little bit. And eventually I wrote a book explaining to people how this whole thing about sales really works. And in it, I say at the very beginning, don't change your business cards until after you've completed all 7 weeks of this book. Yeah. Don't get any more printed. You're better off not to have them, especially when networking in person. It is so much better to say, I'm out of cards. Let me have yours so I can follow up with you. So much better. That's not what I did, by the way. I learned networking the hard way. I went to hundreds of networking events, gave out thousands of business cards, built up a ton of goodwill, and had no business because I thought if somebody had my card, they would call me if they needed me.
Yeah.
Wrong. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so my fascination with helping women entrepreneurs and why I started the Women Entrepreneur Network is because there's nobody teaching these skills in a way that works when you're also dealing with who's taking care of the kids, who's taking care of mom and dad, what's for dinner, and what have we forgotten? Did we leave anybody at the store? Because we get distracted. And there wasn't anything that I could find that worked for me. So I just sat down and wrote it. And it's just a lesson a day, every day of the week, 7 days a week for 7 weeks. And in 49 lessons over that period of time, 49 days, your relationship with your business will change. And that's what had to happen for me. I had to stop working and start understanding that sales is not about money. And the money comes the minute you realize that sales is about service, and it's not even about what I'm good at. It's about what you need.
Yep.
Period. It was just that simple. But oh my God, talk about a mindset reset. Yeah. And of course, I predate the word mindset. We just called it attitude.
Yeah. Mindset is something that's also another thing that's thrown out there so much, and what's really interesting, Jackie, I say this to a lot of the entrepreneurs in our community. I say, before your mindset, you probably need to start with the heart set, because your heart needs to be set before you can start working on your mindset. And if you can do that, then you'll go to the skill sets, because everything naturally flows and follows. But what I love about the 7 and the 49 lessons is, it has to be pursued. It has to be built on. It has to, those 49 lessons, it's beautiful, because that's almost like that mind, that muscle, the memory, there's a certain treatment, or, dare I say, brainwashing, and I say so many a times, brainwashing may be a bad word, but some people actually need a little bit of brainwashing so they can move forward again. Don't they?
We give other people permission to brainwash us every time we turn on a television, every time we watch a video, every time we even go to YouTube. We are giving people access to our brains, and our brains are building out new neural matter based on what we're putting into them, what we are allowing into them. And that level of awareness is the first step. Everything in my world starts first with awareness, and second with attitude. Attitude is probably closer to what you would call your heart set. It is, what is the attitude that I'm going to have for this? Because when you start having some control over your attitude, then and only then do you have control over your actions. If you don't have control over your attitude, you cannot control your actions. You can decide all you want to that you're going to go to the gym and eat lettuce, and you'll find yourself on the couch with a pastry and a remote control, because it's not your brain that's in charge. It's your habits. It's your belief systems, most of all. And so the awareness is first, and checking in with the attitude, which your attitude comes from directly from your belief systems. You can find out a lot about what somebody believes just by checking in with their attitude.
Oh gosh, and you can see what their actions are just by the behaviors they exhibit from that attitude. I mean, it just all comes together. We are getting right at the end of the show, and I would be remiss if we don't talk about my favorite part. I call it raising up our youth. And in our organization, our fifth pillar is service to our youth. My wife and I work tirelessly with the foster community in our area. My proud goal is I personally have raised over $1 million for youth in the past 35 years. So I'm old enough. Oh my God, 35 years. It's just amazing when I say that. I'm 57 years old now, Jackie, and I've lived a really great life. But one of the places I've always have a fond heart for is it's kids. And I pale in comparison in what I've done for youth versus what you've done in youth. And, I bow to you because you have put together something that it may be heard about, but I don't know if there's all the time, there's a done about, and there's a crisis with a lot of our youth, and a lot of that crisis leads to suicide. And you have an organization, I want to make sure I have it right, which is Teen Suicide Prevention Society. Tell us a little bit about this. It's a little bit newer organization that you have put together in the last, within the decade. Tell us a little bit about why and what that organization is.
Why? Why? Because on August the 3rd, 2019, my middle daughter, Stephanie, at the age of 37, gave a 7-minute message that matters. That's what I teach people to do. I teach people how to sell in 7 minutes. I teach people how to deliver a powerful message in 7 minutes. And during that 7-minute talk, she shared about her multiple suicide attempts. Now, I had lived through them, but we hadn't really talked about them. And we didn't talk about them for very good reasons. The first reason we didn't talk about them is because, remember I said I wasn't good at sales? Well, there's one place I'm really good at sales. I sold myself on the idea that as long as Stephanie was getting professional help, we didn't need to talk about it. And I had bought into a myth. I didn't know it was a myth. I thought it was a truth. I was scared of putting the idea back in her head. Now I know you can't put an idea in someone's head. It's already there. If you don't think your kids are thinking about suicide, you need to be talking to your kids. Here's why. After that talk and the shock that I went through during her talk, which became a TEDx talk, and people can watch it at the teensuicidepreventionsociety.com. After that talk, Stephanie and I decided to work together. Who knew that was possible?
Wow.
Along with her sisters, we co-founded the Teen Suicide Prevention Society and started down this journey. And the one thing that hit us really, really quickly is that people who have suicide prevention programs are not preventing anything except death. Their whole goal is, how do you stop someone from dying? But for me, when it comes to suicidal thinking, that's not prevention. That's intervention. If it only kicks in when somebody's known to be at risk, you've waited too long. We think waiting for signs that someone's at risk is looking for trouble. Because, Robert, for two reasons. We're living in a day and an age where often the first sign that somebody is struggling is an attempt, and they don't all survive. So we went way upstream. We took a totally different track. Instead of asking, how do you stop suicide? We started asking, how do you stop suicidal thinking from getting stuck in someone's heads? Not how do you stop suicidal thinking, because you can't. It's part of the natural negative bias. We got it from Og. It's part of our worst case scenario problem solving mechanism. Freud said suicidal thoughts are normal. So we're not trying to stop suicidal thinking. We just want to stop them from getting stuck. We call it a negative echo chamber, and it gets stuck because you're afraid to talk about it. If someone is afraid to share that they're having a suicidal thought, that they're struggling with feeling down a little longer than they think is good for them, what's going on in the brain? Hey, Robert, you ever tried not to think about an elephant?
Well, it's hard to do after you say the word elephant, you know, and
prancing pachyderms.
It imprints in you.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
when somebody's got a suicidal thought and they're afraid of expressing it, they try not to think about it. And when they're trying not to think about it, then they're thinking about trying not to think about it. And what they're doing is doubling down on the thought. The negative echo chamber sets in, and your brain is delightful. Your subconscious mind is elegantly designed to bring about what you think about. By the way, this is the law of attraction in action, just the part that people don't like to talk about. Because now, especially in a teen, they don't have a prefrontal cortex that's fully developed. It's not built till they're 12 and not developed and programmed properly until they're 24, if we're even lucky that they have it then. You know, they don't have an emotional pause button. They don't have perspective. And their subconscious mind starts making plans and looking for opportunities to bring about what they're thinking about. And if what they're thinking about is suicide, all it takes is opportunity to cross subconscious plan, and they're gone. We have teenagers waking up in emergency rooms going, I have no idea how this happened. And they are being honest. They did not have a conscious plan, which is my big pet peeve with most suicide prevention conversations that say, do you have a plan? They do not have a conscious plan. Guys, the questions are all screwed up. That's why we went with 4 simple questions. And do we have 5 minutes, or am I going to have to come back and demo this?
We're going to have to come back. We are already over on time.
Everybody can watch it at the Teen Suicide Prevention, because I embedded the talk that saves lives in my TEDx talk.
And what I'm going to do, Jackie, is I'm going to go ahead and scroll across the information here. Again, I'm talking with Jackie Simmons, and she's with Success Journey Academy. Her contact information is jackie@jackiesimmons.com. You can also reach her there, you know, to ask about her Teen Suicide Prevention Society, which she co-founded with her daughter Stephanie. And I think that what a wonderful, you know, way to bond and give back, you know, with your daughter to many teens who, you know, these ideas are accelerant in the society that we have, because this digital technology is speeding up the wrong communication as well, isn't it?
I'm going to be really blunt. We don't work very much with teens. We work with adults, because what we've discovered is that emotional intelligence is caught, not taught. And so if I get parents to be able to have this talk with their friends, they're going to start shifting their brains. And when they have the talk with their teen, they start helping the teen immediately start building out a buffer between them and the edge. This is how you prevent yourself from having to worry about whether or not your kid is struggling. You have this preventative talk. And parents, it's up to you. Because if you're not willing to talk about it, your kid's never going to come to you to talk about it.
Jackie, you are amazing. I appreciate you so much on coming on this show today. Let's have some conversations about going deeper into what you do for the parents of teenagers themselves, and really society in general. I'm glad that you're an amazing impactor, and you had the time to come on our show and speak with me. If you have a little bit of time after the show, please stay with me just for a little bit so we can kind of compare some calendars. Thank you again for being our show today.
You're very welcome.
All right. Again, I have been with Jackie Simmons of Success Journey Academy. I appreciate her so much for being on the show. I hope you appreciate her as much as I do. Remember, you can catch this show on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/iEntrepreneur Radio, or go to our website at iEntrepreneurNetwork.com and click on the little YouTube icon on there to catch this show. Again, we are here every 2:30 to 3:30 Mountain Standard Time. I want to thank you for your time being with us here. I know everyone has places to go and things to do, but you took time and space in your place to do that with us, and I want to say thank you for it. Have a great week, everyone.
You've been watching the iEntrepreneur Show, a production of the iEntrepreneur Radio Network, with host Robert W. Jones. Join Robert each week as he visits with new and exciting guests who inspire, teach, and mentor entrepreneurs worldwide. Follow Robert each Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, and 8:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time.